By 2050, the traditional American office is, well, it's going to look like a museum exhibit.
Oh, absolutely. It really is.
I mean, I want you to take a second right now and actually picture your workplace today. Just look at the people you interact with, the faces in your morning meetings, how your teams collaborate.
Right.
Now think about what that exact same space looked like 30 years ago. It was fundamentally
It's
different.
a different world.
Yeah. But here is the wild part. In another 20 years, the entire landscape is going to transform completely once again.
It's inevitable.
And we aren't just talking about, like, shifting fashion trends or whether people are wearing suits versus hoodies. We are heading into a profound demographic tidal wave, one that is actively rewriting the rules of who holds power, how we communicate, and what it even means to go to work.
It really is a massive structural upheaval. We're looking at a fundamentally different composition of the workforce. And the fascinating thing is, well, most organizations are still trying to run this new, highly diverse workforce on an operational system built decades ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's causing an incredible amount of friction.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this. We are going to unpack how the modern workplace is changing demographically and really explore the mechanisms behind why different groups experience the exact same office in predictably different ways.
That's the key right there.
Right. We'll also look at how companies are trying to build truly multicultural environments and, the intense, often messy challenges they face doing it. To anchor this, we are looking through the lens of Dr. Catherine Miller's work, Organizational Communication.
A foundational text.
It really is. Because her work doesn't just look at who is sitting in the building. She forces us to look at how the building itself was designed, and more importantly, who it was designed for.
Because you can't understand the modern organization without understanding its underlying architecture.
Right.
And to do that, you have to start with the raw numbers. I mean, the demographics dictate the communication patterns.
So let's get into those numbers because they are staggering. The U.S. is projected to become a majority-minority nation by 2050.
Which is a huge milestone.
A colossal shift, heavily driven by the Hispanic population, growing to an estimated 29% of the country. And then you have the age factor. By 2050, more than 20% of the U.S. population will be 65 or older.
But if you look at how that compares globally, a really unique economic picture emerges.
How so?
Well, yes, the U.S. population is aging, but the total population is also expected to hit 400 million.
Right. We're still growing.
Exactly. That means our key working age demographic is actually going to keep growing. Contrast that with countries like China and Japan.
Or it's shrinking, right.
Sharply declining, yes. Their working age populations are dropping fast.
Wait, so while other major economies are shrinking, ours is expanding? But it's becoming this incredibly complex, multi-generational web.
Precisely. You have older generations working much longer, sitting right across the conference table from Generation Y.
Oh, man. I can see the friction there.
Yeah, the data shows us this creates real behavioral clashes. Gen Y is highly motivated and, incredibly tech-savvy.
But older workers probably don't see it that way.
Right. They frequently perceive them as impatient. They have entirely different baseline for how fast things should move and how communication should flow.
It's like we're swapping out the entire cast of a long-running TV show, but expecting the script to stay exactly the same.
That's a great way to put it.
And the gender shifts are just as dramatic,
right?
Women represented 47% of the U.S. workforce in 2012, and were projected to outnumber men by 2020. But here is the stat that genuinely threw me. Despite that growth, the U.S. has actually plummeted on the global stage. We dropped from 6th place in 1990 to 17th in 2013 among developed nations for women's workforce participation.
Stark drop.
Like, how does that happen? We have this cultural narrative of constant progress, but the numbers say we're stalling out.
It happens because, as I mentioned, we are trying to run modern demographics on legacy hardware.
Legacy hardware. Break that down for me.
Think about the assumptions baked into standard corporate policies. They were largely built around an era where the traditional nuclear family was the default.
Like the 1950s model.
Exactly. Where an employee had a stay-at-home spouse to manage the entire domestic sphere. But today, married couples make up less than half of U.S. households.
Wow. Less than half.
Yeah. So when an organization assumes you have someone at home to watch a sick kid or, wait for the plumber, They are designing policies for a workforce that largely doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, I love that legacy operating system analogy. It's like trying to run modern apps on 1950s code.
It just doesn't work.
The system inevitably crashes. But what does that crash actually look like for you and me on a Tuesday afternoon?
It looks like systemic barriers.
Right, because just putting diverse people in a room doesn't automatically level the playing field. The data makes it painfully clear that certain groups hit predictable walls.
They do. And we have to look closely at the mechanisms of those persistent disparities. It isn't just about bad luck, it's about how the system is wired.
Let's unpack the reality for women first. We hear about the wage gap constantly, but the specific mechanics outlined in Miller's work are, they're incredibly frustrating.
Very.
Women earning 77 cents to a man's dollar is the macro stat, but it starts instantly. Even a single year out of college, despite having higher average GPAs, women average just 80% of their male peers' pay.
Which is wild.
That compounding loss over a 40-year career is astronomical.
And that financial gap is reinforced by structural career traps.
Yeah.
You have the well-known glass ceiling, keeping women out of the executive suite.
Right.
But then you also have the mommy track.
Oh, yes.
Huh.
Where women who seek flexible arrangements, maybe to handle caregiving, are instantly assumed to want fewer advancement opportunities.
Exactly.
It's like the organization says, oh, you need to leave at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. I guess you don't want to be VP.
Yeah, it's the penalty for taking what researchers call an off-ramp. If a professional steps off the traditional uninterrupted career path to care for children, trying to find an on-ramp back into their career later is notoriously difficult.
Because the system doesn't know what to do with them.
Right. It isn't built to reintegrate them at the level they left, which results in permanent cascading setbacks in both seniority and pay.
And the barriers are equally systemic for minority groups. There's evidence of literal color discrimination that is just deeply unsettling to read.
It's very confronting data.
Studies show that lighter-skinned applicants are routinely hired over darker-skinned applicants who possess the exact same qualifications on their resumes.
You also see this vulnerability at the macroeconomic level. When recessions hit, they don't impact everyone equally.
Right.
The data highlights that economic downturns have a severe, disproportionate impact on Black male unemployment compared to other demographic groups.
They're often the first displaced when the system contracts. But let's talk about what happens when you actually do get the job. You're in the building, but you're still hitting walls because of what are called relational barriers.
The informal networks.
Yeah, the classic water cooler talk. Why is missing out on a casual chat such a big deal?
Because you have to understand where power actually lives in an organization.
It's not on the org chart.
Rarely. Power rarely sits neatly within the formal organizational chart. It flows through informal networks. If you aren't invited to the casual lunch or the golf game or the after-work drinks,
You're starved of the organization's invisible currency.
entirely. You miss out on organic mentorship. You don't get the early warnings about impending structural changes.
Oh, wow, that's true.
And you don't get the chance to casually pitch a new idea to a superior in a low-stakes environment.
You're totally on the loop.
And because those informal networks naturally form around shared backgrounds and comfort levels, which historically has been white men, anyone outside that demographic defaults to being an outsider.
Which brings us to this exhausting concept of tokenism, being the highly visible sole representative of a group.
It's a heavy burden.
The material mentions the astronomer Jan 11, and her story really stuck with me. She explicitly rejected the burden of having to constantly answer questions about what it was like to be a woman scientist.
She just wanted to do her job.
Exactly. She just wanted to study the universe. It's like you're forced to act as the official PR ambassador for your entire demographic every time you open your mouth.
Tokenism is draining because it amplifies every mistake you make while simultaneously erasing your individual identity. You become a symbol rather than a colleague.
That sounds miserable.
It is.
Yeah.
And this exclusionary dynamic goes far beyond just race and gender.
Yeah. We have to look at what are termed co-cultural groups. Take the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA.
A landmark piece of legislation.
It is, but the data shows only 21% of the disabled population is actually in the workforce. Why? Because the system views accommodations as a burden rather than a baseline. We also see LGBT employees navigating incredibly fraught environments. Because a Federal Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA, hasn't been passed, they often have to rely on a confusing patchwork of state laws.
Or just the goodwill of company-specific policies.
Right.
And shifting that reality requires proactive, uncomfortable effort. For instance, the Chicago Transit Authority, the CTA, had to institute highly specific sensitivity training to address harassment based on sexual orientation and gender identity.
They couldn't just hand out a manual.
No, they had to teach employees that low-level language and casual, supposedly joking comments actively create a hostile environment. They
Yeah.
wear people down.
Okay, so if these systemic barriers are so deeply baked into the water cooler culture, what are companies actually doing to fix it? Are they just slapping legal band-aids on it, or are they fundamentally rewriting the code?
It's usually an evolution. If you look at how companies actually try to solve this, they generally progress through 3 distinct phases of workplace development.
Let's walk through them. Phase 1 is first-generation affirmative action. This is where a company is strictly focused on legal mandates. They're just trying to meet quotas and avoid lawsuits.
And from what the research shows, this phase is actually miserable for everyone.
Yeah, it breeds intergroup conflict and hostility, right?
Mhm.
Because people feel it's just a numbers game.
It is entirely reactionary. But that eventually forces organizations into phase 2, which is second-generation affirmative action.
Okay, what changes there?
Here, the company has met its basic numbers, and the focus shifts to actively supporting female and minority employees. But there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
It is still largely about helping them fit into our existing legacy system.
Got it. They're providing a ladder, but they're still asking people to climb the exact same exclusionary wall.
Precisely. Which brings us to the ideal state, phase 3, the multicultural organization.
This is where we actually rewrite the code.
Yes. This shifts away from just offering support. A true multicultural organization deliberately capitalizes on diversity. It is characterized by full, structural, and informal integration.
So people aren't just in the building.
Right. They are represented at every level of leadership and deeply embedded in those informal power networks. And crucially, it's marked by low intergroup conflict.
It sounds like we're moving from simply checking a box to actually baking the cake with a bunch of new distinct ingredients.
That analogy.
But getting to phase 3 requires a massive investment of time and resources. Why would a corporation do that? Well, to justify it, scholars Cox and Blake developed what's known as the business case for diversity.
Yes, the business case.
They essentially argue that diversity isn't just a nice moral idea. It directly drives profits.
They map out 4 specific operational advantages. First is creativity and problem solving.
Makes sense.
If everyone in the room has the exact same background, they will all look at a problem from the exact same angle. Diverse viewpoints inherently generate a wider range of alternatives.
Okay, what's the second one?
Second is marketing. Deep cultural sensitivity within your team radically improves your global and domestic reach. You don't have to guess what a diverse customer base wants because your team is your customer base.
Oh, that's smart. And the third advantage is resource acquisition, which makes total sense to me.
How so?
Well, the best companies attract the absolute best talent. If you have a reputation for being a true multicultural organization, top performers from all backgrounds are going to flock to you.
Absolutely. And the fourth is systems flexibility. Diverse systems are naturally less standardized and more fluid.
Allowing the company to react much faster to environmental or economic changes.
Exactly. However, there is a fascinating caveat to all of this. It isn't instantaneous magic.
So just throwing diverse people together doesn't magically solve problems.
Oh. The research shows that diverse groups actually struggle initially. Compared to homogeneous groups, diverse teams usually have a much harder time with basic communication and process at the start.
Because they don't share that baseline assumption of how things should be done.
Right.
A homogeneous group can make a decision in 10 minutes because they all think identically.
Exactly. Homogeneous groups agree incredibly fast, but they often agree on mediocre, unexamined ideas. Diverse groups have to work significantly harder just to establish a baseline.
But it pays off later.
Yes. And this is the key. Once they figure out how to communicate across their differences, they outperform homogeneous groups over time.
Wow.
Because they have rigorously debated multiple conflicting perspectives, the solutions they generate are vastly superior. But that only happens if they are managed inclusively.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back here for a second because this business case feels incredibly cynical to me.
It does have its critics.
Are we really just reducing human diversity to a profit metric? Like, if we only focus on the bottom line, are we basically treating people like specialized tools in a corporate toolbox rather than human beings?
You've hit on the exact dark side of this approach, and it's a major point of contention in the research. We have to look at the critical work of scholars like Linda Perrotin.
What did she say?
She argues that relying exclusively on the business case for diversity is deeply problematic.
Because it crowds out the basic human argument.
Yes. When you justify diversity solely by saying it increases profits, you stop saying we should do this because it is equitable and fair. The moral argument vanishes.
That's depressing.
And Perrotin points out that this creates highly restrictive, discursive rules within the organization.
Meaning it creates a kind of corporate gag rule.
Essentially. If diversity is only valued when it makes the company money or looks positive on a brochure, there is zero room for employees to point out systemic flaws.
Wow.
It creates an unspoken rule of, we don't want complaining women. You are allowed to be at the table to boost the bottom line, but you are absolutely not allowed to challenge the underlying power structure.
That is chilling. You're invited to the party, but only if you stick to the approved talking points.
It's a very conditional acceptance.
And managing this new reality creates other types of friction, too. We have to look at the backlash surrounding affirmative action programs.
Yes, that's a huge source of tension.
The data shows these programs can sometimes lead to stigmatization. A highly qualified employee might feel victimized or undervalued because others assume they are only there to fill a quota.
And the literature is clear on how to mitigate that specific friction. You have to aggressively emphasize merit alongside any preferential criteria.
So, radical transparency.
Exactly. Organizations must be relentlessly transparent about job qualifications and the specific objective performance metrics of the individuals hired. Transparency is the only antidote to that suspicion.
Right. Even if you solve the hiring friction, you still have the massive, messy friction of balancing work and home life.
The daily struggle.
Right. Building a multicultural organization means accommodating radically different life paths. The material talks about the profound identity struggles workers face. For example, a woman trying to constantly reconcile her working self with her mothering self.
It's exhausting.
To help, organizations try to offer family-friendly policies. Flex time, on-site daycare, expanded leave.
But those exact policies often detonate unexpected resentment among the rest of the staff.
Oh, the Thanksgiving shift example. This is so relatable.
A classic example.
The research highlights how employees without children often end up deeply resenting these family-friendly perks. They feel bitter because they are the ones who end up having to work late or cover the holiday shifts to make up for the parents who are utilizing those flex benefits.
Right.
So practically speaking, how on earth does a manager navigate that? How do you handle it when one employee's family-friendly perk becomes another employee's working Thanksgiving?
It is the ultimate test of modern leadership. A truly multicultural organization cannot just tolerate differences. It has to actively construct a culture that respects multiple life choices simultaneously.
That sounds really hard.
It requires intense critical thinking. If you grant a flexibility perk to one group, you have to ensure the resulting workload doesn't unfairly crush another demographic.
Right? It's a balancing act.
It isn't about treating every single person exactly the same. It's about ensuring structural equity so that no segment of your workforce feels alienated or exploited.
Man, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. Let's trace the arc of what we've unpacked.
Sound good.
The workforce is right in the middle of a demographic tidal wave. We are becoming more diverse, older, and trying to navigate a space where women are a dominant force, even as U.S. workforce participation lags behind the rest of the developed world.
We're in transition.
We've dug into why different groups experience the exact same office differently, from the compounding mechanics of the wage gap and color discrimination to the exhausting reality of tokenism and being shut out of informal power networks.
We also tracked how organizations attempt to evolve. We moved from the reactionary quotas of first-generation affirmative action toward the goal of a true multicultural space.
Phase 3.
Exactly. We explored the business case, the idea that diversity drives better problem-solving and market reach, but we also confronted the critical flaws of that model.
Like the danger of relying only on a profit motive.
The gag rules it can create, and the intense day-to-day resentment that flares up over things like work-life balance policies.
So, I want you to look around your own workplace again. Think about the physical and virtual spaces you navigate every day. Are you currently operating in a Phase 1 quota-filling environment? Or are you seeing the mechanics of a true multicultural organization?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
Take a hard look at the informal networks. Who is getting invited to the casual lunch where the real decisions are made? And, maybe more importantly, who is consistently left off the invite?
And I'll leave you with a final thought to mull over regarding that business case for diversity.
Let's hear it.
If a company's justification for diversity is built entirely on the promise of increased profits and rapid innovation, well, what happens during an economic downturn?
Oh, wow.
What happens during a quarter when a newly diverse team is struggling to communicate and doesn't immediately boost the bottom line? Does the justification for their presence suddenly disappear? Or is there a deeper, fundamental human imperative for diversity, a commitment to equity that absolutely must outlast the financial cycle?
It really makes you wonder. When you look at that shifting cast of characters in your office over the next 20 years, will the underlying legacy code finally be rewritten to value them for who they are, or just for what they can produce?